Okay, so let's grab this. Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, September 30th in the difficult year of 2020. Hopefully it'll be more difficult than the next. My name is Malik Moazzam Doulat. I'm a professor in the Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice. And I'd like to welcome you to a hybrid event that is both a class, CTSJ 204's Torture, Sex, and Metaphysics, and a special edition of CTSJ's podcast, weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, called The Matrix. Today's show is generously, kindly, and importantly co-sponsored by the MAC department, who are well represented both on the panel and in the audience, and the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, whose director Susan Young is joining me here, is joining us and is on the panel and be asking questions, but who instigated this whole thing, who reached out and wanted to work on the issues that we're discussing here. So very much thank you both to MAC and to Dr. Young for everything you're doing here. We're also being supported, our speakers are being supported by LA Encounters, so thank you to them. So a real quick thing about the Matrix itself. What we do in the Matrix is focus on pressing current events. And what we're trying to do is to connect our community, that's both our students and the broader community, to experts, scholars, artists, and effective activists to help them pursue their ends and transform the world as they see fit. So we have a lot of events. We have one at least every week, sometimes twice a week, and you can just go to oxy.edu/matrix. And you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at CTSJ Oxy. That's less important. We've got a couple of things going on coming up. For instance, tomorrow at noon, we've got Whitney Davis, who was I'm trying to get this right. So it was an ex-CVS exec who became a whistleblower about the toxic environment around diversity and sexism in the company. And she'll be interviewed by Dr. Nicole Haggard. So that's coming up tomorrow. All right. So today, the title of our program is Overcoming Anti-Muslim and Anti-Arab Representations in the Media. I'll at some point explain why I put those two together. We are recording this conversation in the context of this course that I mentioned. And one of the themes of the course, besides the persistence of the practice of torture, which is its core idea, is the way that the circulation of dehumanizing images of Muslims and Arabs, I guess I should say it now, which is like there's not a lot of discrimination at this level between Muslims and Arabs in a certain way, right? Even though, of course, most Muslims are not Arab, has played in so the role that those dehumanizing images have played in the justifications and implementations of torture, violence, and specific forms of cruelty by Western powers in the Middle East and North Africa, from the colonial project, at least to Abu Ghraib. I'll say it like that, that's inflammatory about it. But that is these images seem to have a powerful role in shaping the nature of violence and the permissibility of it. So that's what I wanted to talk about. So very briefly, I'm going to do the introductions. No, I'm not going to do the introductions, actually. We're going to let Susan do the introductions, and I'm going to step out, thank goodness.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad I can be here, and I'm glad that I have the privilege of introducing our two guests on the panel today. First, I'd like to introduce Sue Obeidi, who is the director of the Muslim Public Affairs Council Hollywood Bureau. She holds an MBA and a B.A. in marketing and has been with MPAC, or the Muslim Public Affairs Council, since November of 2000. In 2017, Sue was chosen for Variety's Inclusion Impact Report as one of the 60 changemakers making the entertainment industry more inclusive. On the front lines of media, she's a vibrant and fresh voice. Her poignant and passionate perspectives appear in op-ed pieces, one of which I believe she shared with us today, for top industry publications such as Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and The Wrap. Sue's been a guest lecturer at American University, the University of Southern California, and Georgetown University, and she has spoken on panels at Sundance Film Festival, Variety Inclusion Summit, Variety Family TV Summit, Teen Vogue Summit, Women in Entertainment, Scholar of Change and the Center for Asian American Media. So she's a very busy person, as you might have guessed. And our second guest is one of our own on the faculty here at Occidental College. He's in the Media Arts and Culture Department. His name is Professor Aleem Hossain. He most recently wrote and directed the sci-fi film called After We Leave, which was actually theatrically released, and you can now watch it through Amazon Prime. He has written and directed a number of other short films and virtual reality projects, and is currently working on a TV pilot script entitled Muslim in America, which tells his autobiographical story through the lens of a superhero. So thank you both.
I think, yay. So Susan, you want to take the first question and get us started?
Sure, and this is a question particularly directed to Sue and your work at MPAC. So can you give us a bird's eye view of your work with the Hollywood Bureau? Like, what is your mission? How do you pursue that mission? What are the nuts and bolts of your work there?
Sure, not a problem. First of all, thank you for the invitation. This is amazing. And you know, Aleem went through the MPAC Familiar Stranger Screenwriting Lab. So this is just kind of like so awesome. We're back together, and I'm honored and privileged to be representing MPAC and MPAC's Hollywood Bureau today. So MPAC's Hollywood Bureau simply works in the industry to change the narrative around Muslims and Islam. Needless to say, the industry has had a field day with Arabs and Muslims since its inception. It's nothing new. It doesn't go back to 9/11. It doesn't go back to the Arab oil crisis back in the 70s. It goes back to, back to when the industry was established. So we work in the industry to enhance narratives, and we do it in 5 ways, but I'm only gonna tell you the top three, just to save time because we wanna move on. Number 1, and they all start with C, which is like really cool. Oh, cool, starts with C. Okay, consult. We consult on TV and film projects, and we work to give notes to production companies and studios. And that is actually a second best way of consulting. Our favorite way of consulting is going into the writers' rooms and doing roundtables before a word is even written, because that gives us the opportunity to understand the character, to understand where the story's going, to see if it's a series, where's the pilot, where do they see it in season 7, and it gives us the opportunity to just kind of talk it through, brainstorm, and it's fun actually doing it that way, and it's more impactful actually. And oftentimes we leave with them saying, wow, we had one direction, but now we're going to go into another direction, which makes us feel really good and like we've helped. The second C is connecting. We connect our Muslim talent, specifically screenwriters, directors, and producers, to industry showrunner, production companies, studios. Oftentimes we'll get a streamer calling saying, hey, we're adapting a book, and we really want an authentic, Muslim voice here. Do you have a female, South Asian, whatever else, hyphen it. And so we're kind of like the conduit there. Similarly, a screenwriter will come to us and say, I have this great pilot or feature that I really believe in. Can you connect us to anyone? And through the years of doing this work, we just established a great network of friends who we could kind of call and connect. We connect also by organizing our screenwriting labs, and which we were done with a couple of weeks ago. And that gives us and our partner the opportunity to identify new talent and see what's out there and see if there are projects out there that we can help move forward. And move forward means getting it done. The third C after consult, connect is contribute. And we contribute our thought leadership in the form of organizing and speaking on panels such as this, and then also writing and publishing our opinion editorials in the trades. And that just kind of gives us the opportunity to get our paradigm out. So net is we work to change narratives, but that's how we go about it.
Fabulous. Oh, wow. Okay. So this is sort of, we're getting to know everybody. So let's just, go to Aleem now. Can you tell us about how you came to be a filmmaker and how you came to Oxy? So what you see your role at Oxy as being. And I hope you'll tell us about the feature film you made. And maybe we can save talking about your new project and we can talk about why that's important. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I am here sort of, with two hats as a filmmaker and a professor. So I'm going to just shout out to my department here at Oxy, Media, Arts, and Culture, which is like such a happy co-sponsor of this event because, not to throw shade, but we live in a city full of film schools. We're in Los Angeles. And many of them, I think, their goal is to basically churn out grads that are exactly what the industry thinks it needs, and it's a professionalization sort of system. And this is a liberal arts college. And, I've been so happy to join this school because I think MAC and the school as a whole is a liberal arts college. It has the idea of creating thinkers and doers and feelers who are thinking about, big issues. And so one of our goals is to create grads who have conversations like this, who can be the people who are the future artists, thinkers, academics, executives in all kinds of media, who can show industries like where they should go. And so this is like a really natural extension of the work that we do. When I talk about myself as a filmmaker, I'm going to get a little more mushy on you here, which is to say, I think if you want to understand me as a filmmaker, you need to understand who I am as a person. I'm an artist. And so it gets to my biography. My father is a Muslim immigrant from Bangladesh. My mother is a white woman who was born in Connecticut and raised Catholic, and in the 70s, they met, got married very soon after Loving versus Virginia. She converted to Islam, and I grew up in this household where we celebrated Eid and had a Christmas tree. Curry and tuna noodle casserole are formative foods for me. And thankfully, one of the best things was my parents were cinephiles. So we watched Bollywood and Spielberg and European art house and the fifth generation of Chinese filmmakers. And so I was just blown away by all the things film could be. For better or for worse, I spent 21 years of my life now obsessed with movies, I think, because of that. And I will say, though, relevant to today, I watched all those kinds of films and I was still so rarely seeing me. I saw Muslims on screen. And by the way, most of that, as we talked about, especially coming out of America, was pretty painful. I saw Muslims in foreign films. And those are pretty good portrayals sometimes, but they were not Muslim Americans. And so I both fell in love with cinema and all of its possibilities, and but also I think felt the lack of seeing myself there. And my personal artistic journey has been, I love genre films. I love science fiction. I love, crime. I love fantasy. And I love them because I think they're really compelling ways to address questions about our society and our world and our values. And most importantly, ways to question those things in ways that are not literal. At the end of the day, I didn't choose to be a journalist or someone who makes public service announcements. Those are also both very valid and important things, but I'm an artist. And so what I want to do is express the things that I'm hopeful for or angry about. And, I just made a sci-fi film that is ostensibly a science fiction film, but really it combines a lot of influences. My films tend to do that, I think, because I grew up with all those things. It's also a commentary on immigration policy. It's also stylistically at odds with most sci-fi films. It's a gritty, partially improvised drama, much more similar to a 70s American indie film, but in the future. And I work in indie film and also in the mainstream industry. And the thing I love about indie film, I'm glad that you sort of talked about it, is that when something is not being done correctly in the mainstream industry, whether it's a lack of representation or representations that are painful or harmful, the best of independent film has always been able to, at the very least, provide a space for people to propose an alternative. It's very hard to make a movie, but it's also easier than it ever has been. Easier than it ever has been, but still very hard. But if you can manage to do it, then you have an answer to what you think is wrong. And if you're lucky, I think you can even influence the industry, but at the very least, you can sort of posit that sort of alternative to what we see. And I think that anything you can do to propose that, and I really feel like anything you can do to sort of counter those narratives matters. And I'll talk about my project later, but I will say that one of the big things I notice about myself, and I'm interested in this conversation, is that I've been making films for 21 years, but I wouldn't say that entire time I was trying to make Muslim American stories, and it's taken me a long time to unpack the fact that wasn't just random preference on my part. I do think the lack of representation and then the painful representation that I did see made me not want to engage. It was hard to hope they'd get told. And I think maybe even part of me felt like those stories weren't valued, even my own story. And so I'm excited now. I've begun to engage with that. Sue and Impact Hollywood Bureau took my script into their lab, and I'm telling more of these stories, and I have some hope. But I think for better or for worse, this conversation is still very, very needed. We are far from, I would say, a positive report card on this subject.
May I jump in, or are we?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
I just want to applaud Aleem, because absolutely, and for Impact's Hollywood Bureau, when we're looking at scripts for our labs, we're not like thinking, okay, does it have to have like Muslim characters or a Muslim theme? That's really not all of it. Is it written by a Muslim? And that is like what we also want to see. So it doesn't have to, like, every script that we get for the lab has to have a Muslim, has to be about Islam. The change is happening by Aleem writing stories and being part of the community, a marginalized community that has been vilified, and that speaks volumes. So I want to applaud you, Aleem, for that distinction too. I just wanted to piggyback on that.
And I think just to piggyback on it before we move forward, to say, like, I think, Sue, you hit it on the head. You talked about a community of people.
Yeah.
Another thing that's been lacking is even a sense of how broad the Muslim American community is.
Yes.
Like, I was so gratified to be included in that. In all honesty, I think we think of it as very monolithic, but I was in a room, a virtual room for this year's screenwriting lab, that I strongly identify as a Muslim American. I'm also, in parentheses, I'll whisper to you, I also think of myself as an atheist who likes pork, right? But I am a Muslim American. I would proudly assert that at the same time. And there were colleagues of mine in that room who agreed with some of that, agreed with none of that, but we were all part of that community, who all have a shared mission, I think, to sort of tell these stories. Because we're just dying to tell them. There are stories, but to the topic of, your class, Malik, and I know issues that are very dear to your heart, Susan, because these stories resonate in good and bad ways, depending on how they're told, throughout the world.
And may I piggyback on that? I'm so sorry. I mean, we can just go on with the first question.
Just have a conversation.
Let's just take over the call.
Ideal.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Go for it.
There is absolutely no litmus test, right? I mean, for MPAC, that is, a Muslim is a Muslim. If someone, identifies as a Muslim, there's no litmus test for that. So I have to tell you, I don't know if that was an aha moment for you, Aleem, but I get conversations like, when I ask people to be on a panel with the WGA or whatever, they're like, they have to tell me their whole backstory about how, well, I was born to Muslim parents, but it's like, don't go there. Like, look, I don't care. You know what I mean? So I tell you, I'm so glad that you said that, and I'm so glad that you felt that comfort in the lab as well.
Sue, I have a couple questions about the lab, actually.
Sure.
How many people do you take? How do you decide who you take?
Yeah.
What are some of the obstacles you face? Things like that.
So just to, like, how many we take, we generally run it tight, a very cohesive group. The lowest number we've ever had was 4, and that was like a feature film workshop. And so we just felt 4 would have been enough. The highest we've ever gone was 12, and that was with just ABC television when it was ABC television. But I think the sweet spot now is 8. And how do we go about it? Was that the second question? How do we put out the call, and we have our criteria, and sometimes we say it has to have a Muslim character. Sometimes we say it doesn't. And so depending on who our partner is. One year we did a lab with a partner that really didn't want to do a Muslim screenwriting lab, but they wanted to do a Manasa lab. And so we did that, and put out that call. And Impact kind of, we do the heavy lifting, but we don't do the hardest job. And I'll tell you why. We'll get the submissions, we'll read all the submissions, and then we'll ask our partner, of the ones we get, how many do you want us to turn over to you? And then we'll pick our pick, and Aleem was one of our picks, and then we turn it over to our partner, and then they pick the winner. And so I always say, let our partner deal with who's going to get in, ultimately. So that's how we do it. Obstacles, gosh, there's just, I mean, we are a Muslim organization and have to adhere to, the sex content and this violence content. And, if there is sex, if there is violence, does it have a need? And if, is it positioned okay kind of thing? So we have to kind of have those conversations. But usually that's really just the obstacle. We don't really go into kind of anything else.
So can you just do the mechanics of the lab? Just maybe take 2 minutes and just go through the mechanics.
Aleem, would you mind doing it? Because
Sure.
you
Yeah,
on the other end of it.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, just to be clear, this structure of a lab is something that exists in a lot of different forms across Hollywood, centered on developing different kinds of projects or talent. So if on the artist side, you see a call, it will describe what they want. In this case, they were open to both TV pilots and feature scripts. So I submitted my TV pilot script. As Sue said, it goes through a reading process and then a selection. And then, labs vary, but usually what a lab is really based around is getting a group of writers together in a room. Everyone reads the scripts. And then you have mentors. You have people who are coming in from the outside, plus the other writers or filmmakers themselves, basically workshopping the material, providing perspective, providing a space that is both knowledgeable of the marketplace, but also not the marketplace itself, so that a space that values these stories getting told, or, that recognizes the special nature of these stories. And the goal is to both connect people, to hopefully to do that. I think the goal is to make the scripts better through a notes process and then also I think to provide paths outward, to sort of say, okay, what's the next step, provide support. And one of the most important things, quite honestly, is it is a gold star. Our industry is just, there are so many scripts in the universe, right, that are just coming into Hollywood. Anything you can give a filmmaker or a writer that lets them, literally like a resume line, just put it on there to be like, hey, somebody else thought this was worthwhile. That's so impactful in Hollywood. It is a place that is constantly trying to figure out, how do I choose from this ocean of content? And so anytime anyone can call something up, hold it up, declare it worthwhile, it helps. And so I think of I got a lot of great feedback. I made connections with fellow, with an exec, with filmmakers, with writers, but also, I got a stamp of approval. And it's one that helps.
Got it. One of our audience members, Sabina Giotto, sorry if I messed up your name, Sabina, has, I think, a totally valid question. Are you going to open up your labs to the world?
Wow, that's to unpack. Yeah, I know. That's to unpack, maybe, but
right.
Not in the near future. I think we're focusing on American Muslim narratives or stories by American Muslims. We get that question a lot. We recently got it because we partnered with the Blacklist on the first ever Muslim list. And so we also decided that we were going to keep it to American Muslims as well. So I'm so sorry to answer it that way, but right now this is, maybe when our bandwidth gets better, we can increase it, but expand it. But right now, unfortunately not.
Yeah, but it's a great model. What a wonderful model to put together. So I guess we should dive into some of the less delicious and wonderful parts of this conversation. So I don't know whether you've seen it, and it's sort of outdated, but it just really had an impact on me when I discovered it after 9/11. And this is Jay Saloom's fake trailer for a fake movie called Planet of the Arabs. Is it this thing? Yeah, I think it's either ubiquitous or no one knows what it is. I can never tell which one it is. But basically, it's a series of clips from Hollywood films and cartoons and just Western media, American media, depicting Muslims, Arabs. And I just put it with a slash next to it because there's no differentiation there, right? There's the Orientalist fantasy of the Arab mixed with the Orientalist fantasy and anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic sort of heritage that comes out of our deep history of the West, wedded together in these clips, television, movies, and he puts them together as a kind of the fear of the Muslim/Arab, right? And I show it in my classes usually in conjunction with a history of anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic thinking, writing, and politics coming out of the 10th century in Spain, right? And how those ideas and those images reproduce themselves over time. So they don't change that much. The core attacks don't change that much, but they sort of linger and are transformed in various ways. So I say all that because I wanted to raise this problem, which is these are almost they're almost Jungian now in their quality, these images. They have this sort of persistence to them, this reality to them, which functions in a complicated way. And so I want to say more than that. I want to say they seem to get internalized even, right? And so I think Aleem was kind of hinting at this like kind of reticence. I had it too. So I moved here, and I can feel slightly embarrassed, more than slightly embarrassed, but we'll say slightly embarrassed for the cameras, about my own distancing from my upbringing and heritage, this sort of Americanizing in a way, sanitizing of it. So the question I have, because I think all that is relatively well known, and obviously you all would have talked about it a great deal. I guess I have two questions. The first one is, do you think that we're making any progress? Is it possible, and how, to make progress in relationship to these modes of representation, which our communities internalize as much as being dangerous? Can we make progress on them? And what, I don't know how to ask this, right? So do you feel the impact of them still? Do you think in your work that we still feel the impact of them, or still as powerful as they once were? I guess it's the same question asked in two ways. And either of you can answer, and you could both, I hope you both answer.
Sure. You want me to go first, Aleem? Look, I'm an immigrant to this country, right? And I came when I was 5. No one wanted to play with me. I remember sometimes I sit and I'll be talking to people, and for some reason I'll get a flashback of that little girl sitting on the courtyard alone because no one wanted to play with her. I'm talking when I was 5 or 6 or 7, okay? And I'll tell you this, that little girl sitting in the playground, misunderstood because of her faith and her background, is what fuels this woman right now, and what fuels the work. And so when you, to me, and to MPAC, the history of Hollywood is fueling the progress that is happening because we have lived experience. We walked in those shoes. And so do we feel the impact in a negative way? Yes, because we still have to overcome the stereotypes, that they brought forth. But it only makes us want to work harder and faster to do those labs, to identify those screenplays, to identify the TV series that we can move along. It's almost like they did us, okay, I'm not going to say they did us a favor. I'm not going to go there, but they put fire under us. And I live my day for MPAC, my heart pacing at 1,000, it's because I'm trying to play catch up, but it's the nicest feeling. They did some serious damage. I'm not minimizing it. I'm just saying it's 2020. It's a different situation. And now the bad is fueling the good. And I don't know what 5 years is going to look like, but to me, from my line of sight, it looks pretty good.
I mean, I 100% agree with everything Sue just said. Like I would, there are times which I think it would be impossible for me to understate like how much even just recent events like the election of Trump and the travel ban and the attacks on Khizr Khan and his son, like fueled my turn to telling these stories. So that is definitely a factor as well. And then, yes, I mean, I think all the psyche stuff that Sue's talking about. So I'm going to jump ahead to another point separate from what she said, because I agree with what she said. I am now at the point that where I'm also dissatisfied with what I think of as the first wave of the attempt to address this. And that is what I think on the surface seems to be a largely sympathetic portrayal. We're seeing a lot of portrayals now in the media of the poor, suffering refugee Muslim. And I think these portrayals are well-intentioned. I think they're trying to say, like, oh man, this is a big human rights issue and these people are coming to America, so let's put them on screen. But like, yet again, like, because there's not a lot of diversity of portrayals, you're creating another kind of sort of like stock inauthentic image that is also going to get burned into people's brains, which is sort of like a helpless, sort of poor, pitiable refugee. Sometimes their internal conflict between their religion and society being unresolvable, or the younger generation never being able to be understood by the older generation. Like, I'm the, son of a guy who came from Bangladesh who didn't tell me not to go to film school. He argued me into going to film school, and so I feel like the concerns I have with the current representation, though, that a lot of them are like sort of sympathetic, but not still authentic. I am, though, like Sue, hopeful. I do feel like we're at a turning point, potentially, in the way that we're a turning point on a lot of issues because of the environment, over all kinds of issues of justice, that we're starting to see nuanced characters and nuanced portrayals. If you haven't read Sue's op-ed in The Hollywood Reporter, please go read that. I think it highlights both progress and problems on this stuff. And so, so I feel like I'm like, it's scary to hope, but I feel some hope because I think that the current state of the TV industry in particular, where there are all these players that are all searching for niche audiences, does mean that people take risks on things. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to see more stuff. There's only a few now. You can look at Rami, or you can go back and see some of the episodes of Master of None, or, there are these things that come here and there. We need to get to a point where there's so many of them that no one has to stand on its own and be everything to everyone. We're not there, but I have some hope for sure.
Yeah. Can I add real quick? And that's why I think in the title of this panel, Overcoming, is when I read, I was drawn to that word because I don't know if any marginalized community in America has overcome, these, even with the LGBTQ community, the Jewish community, they're still dealing with so much. The Black community, obviously, and they've been doing this for so long. So I am very hopeful, but there's so much more work to do. And I'll tell you, Aleem, I agree with you about what is coming out. Like even the TV show Transplant by NBC is a great series about a Syrian refugee who is a doctor and then gets hired in America to, as a doctor, has the flashbacks. But you know what? With time too, we flood the industry with more content that's not that. And with time, it will happen. But we're standing on the shoulders of so many people who cracked those doors open for us.
For sure. And I think that even those portrayals like Transplant, which you write about in the op-ed, like those are huge steps forward, even just employment wise, a series lead is a life-changing, even today when series leads in TV shows don't make as much money as they used to in the 90s, like even today, being the lead in a TV show is a life-changing employment opportunity, and so I think sometimes we focus on the representation, but remember that when you get the representation, you're also giving employment opportunities to people, and big ones in an industry that it's hard to crack. And so, I definitely would celebrate those portrayals as well, as much as I also want more.
Absolutely.
I see we have a couple of questions from people who are participating, but before we jump to that, I just have one last question because, we're offering this in the context of a class. So what can students and other consumers of this media do to help overcome some of the challenges of representation? Is it choosing not to watch things? Is it advocating with impact? What are some tangible things people can do?
Well, I knew you were gonna ask this question, and I want to highlight what I personally think, it may seem a little random, is the single most interesting development in this subject in the last year. And that is a decision that MGM, one of the studios, a smaller one, but MGM, one of the studios made. They're remaking Orion Pictures into an independent studio. It's going to be run by a Black woman, Alana Mayo, and she has greenlight power, independent greenlight power to greenlight movies, and a guaranteed budget to make a certain number of movies. And to me, that is the gold standard. And I think we need to pressure more companies to say, great, you tweeted about Black Lives Matters, you post an amazing rainbow of people in your diversity image on Instagram, put your money where your mouth is, and admit to yourselves that you're not always the best at getting out of your own way. Create independent entities that you commit to funding, that you give green light power to independent people from those communities and from those interest groups. And it doesn't have to be about identity. There are a lot of issues that need to come to the forefront. And that's a hard thing for any individual student to make happen, though I do think public pressure campaigns help. That being said, I think to me, the easiest one, we live in a world where Netflix tracks every single second of what you watch. And so don't watch stuff you don't like. If you don't like it, don't like it. But if you see stuff that you're like, I want that to exist in the world, watch that first. Watch it sooner from when it launches. Don't save it for later. Watch more of it. They are literally tracking every single possible metric you can imagine and ranking things and deciding what to make more of. And you can vote with your dollars and your eyeball time in that way, for sure.
Sorry, can I add one more thing just to piggyback on Aleem? Very true. Like, for example, Netflix's Cuties that got all over the press now. And the Muslim community is very upset about it. But what ended up happening, they got more eyeballs on it. And so we need to get to a point too, when there is something so bad and we know it's bad, don't be curious. It's not a car accident on the freeway. Don't look, just don't watch. And yeah, so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, hold on. Let's take a couple of these questions. You think I'd figure out this mute button by now? So these are, they're right in line with what we've been talking about. So let's start near in the proximate point, which was one of our attendees wants to know, what did you think about Rami and its impact on Hollywood?
So I did not watch season 2. I felt for personal reasons other than the show. I had a loss in the family and I wasn't in the mindset. So I'm going to watch season 2. But I mean, look, the bottom line is it's what we need. We need more Ramis, and we need Ramis from women, and we need not one-offs, and we need to flood the industry with projects by American Muslims. To change it. And I think the question might be about the content more than, just the idea. The reality is that's very authentic. That was his life. That's his life and lived experience. So we just need more of that.
Yeah, I mean, like my sort of gold standard, one of the things I say to my students all the time in my classes at Oxy and other filmmakers that I meet is like, I think at the end of the day, like, your real mission as an artist, the one I figured out for myself, is like to just make the stuff that wouldn't exist in the world if I didn't exist. And I think that, when someone like Rami or anyone else is making their show, I'm excited about it. I think you can quibble in details all night long, and we can sort of and fight different battles this way. But like, I really want to see, and not just Muslim Americans, I want to see a system that just allows more people to take risks and just make the thing only they would make. And if that's happening, I really do think it is in the end productive and positive.
And Rami Youssef, I mean, he worked so hard to get Rami. He's so talented and has, some great people around him. And so it's a great case study for us to say, well, how did it happen? It wasn't handed to him on a silver platter. He worked hard for it and deserves every success he has. But does it push the envelope with some members of the Muslim community? Yeah, but so what? You know what I mean? So what? So does Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, so this question, Sabina's back. Thank you, Sabina, to pronounce your name properly. But you asked a really interesting question. So let's work on this question a little bit. We have a few extra minutes, and hopefully people, if they have other questions, will ask them. It says, so how Muslim, in quotation marks, I assume there's a scare quotes, right? Can you be in Hollywood, both in front of and behind the screen? And so that's an answerable question, obviously. But one of the things you've both been talking about is complex, nuanced, diverse representations of what it is to be a Muslim. So that I want you to talk more about that. I think that's really important to talk about. But I guess we should start with this, which is there still a sense that either you have to be more or less adhering to, although Rami suggests otherwise, right? More or less adhering to a Orientalist fantasy. I'll just keep with this language, because my class will know what I'm talking about, of what a Muslim is. So then they recognize it as a Muslim, and then they'll put you in a show or a movie or something. Or have we gotten beyond that a bit? Has it gotten more interesting than that already? So I'll just leave it at that.
I think on that last point, Malik, the industry is pretty bad at that in a lot of ways. I think it is constantly, I think, desiring to have things be in a box because it understands them that way. And I think that's not just unique to Hollywood. I think that's just sort of it's like a capitalist thing. It's like, it's this level of just like definable, understandable. How do we push it through a system? And that's an inertia that I think is still out there. I'd be interested to see what Sue thinks on the side of things she works on. Like for me personally, like that's a complicated question for me because number one, I have to acknowledge my own privileges. Like I'm half white, half, South Asian. And I went to an elite college. I grew up among, just really wonderful, mostly white friends. And so like, I think the extent to which I know how to navigate all that hides some of that from me. I will say Hollywood is a constant enigma, right? It's like, it's full of liberals, yet we have Oscars so white, right? Like, so I think that there is for sure, I absolutely tell you that there would be reticence to certain to certain aspects of Islam. I think particularly, my guess is the more devout you are. I think that that's scary in terms of hiring and engaging with and working with. I mean, the way that's a problem, overall. I don't know if it's worse or better, but I think that's just a problem. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel the burden of the complexity issue. Like, I think that my desire, like, I want a Muslim American Don Draper or like Leslie Knope, like these characters that are both like terrible, but also awesome. And you can't take your eyes away from them. They're not all positive, but they're not all negative. I want that, but I have like real concerns about doing that when there's so few, and it's a mind trap, that is hard to get out of. And at the end of the day, like my personal answer has been like, you know what, like I think that there's a purpose in just creating those portrayals, and a certain amount of the reaction to them is outside of my control. I'm just beginning the journey to telling those kinds of stories, and we're going to see what happens. I think the price that you pay sometimes for telling stories about Muslim Americans is higher. The internet is a cruel place. I just made a sci-fi film that does not even have a Muslim American character in it. It's been loved by some sci-fi fans, legitimately and totally fairly hated by some sci-fi fans. But then I also got comments that have nothing to do with the film, and very clearly are oriented on my last name, or just, like some intimations of I make some extreme storytelling choices. It's a slow, brutal, bleak film. And that somehow kind of gets linked also though to who I am. Maybe I don't quite fit that sort of model. It's a minority of people, but it's out there. And those things, again, are like, I think a lot of filmmakers face them for sure. If you talk to like, Black filmmakers and women filmmakers, like you'll see that as well. And so just the variants change, but those weigh on my mind more the more I turn to the subject matter. And so that's also something I'm sort of trying to figure out how to mentally sort of deal with. But I'd be curious, Sue, like when you think about, you have a more bird's eye view than I do. Do you think people employment-wise are more open to Muslim Americans than they used to be?
Very much so. I've in the last since the elections of 16, very much so. Since people were marching at the airports for us and saying let them in, very much so. That's when we got the call from Shondaland and said, we want to create a Muslim character on Grey's Anatomy. Help us create her. And I'll tell you this: if we see a second term for this president, there's probably going to be more opportunities. And I'm just being real, right? And so I can only clock it up to 5 years ago. That's what I can only do. I can only tell you it's been better up until 5 years, like 5 years ago, from 5 years ago. And so to Sabine, I will just encourage her to just write her lived experience, but to also remember, and this is the hard pill to swallow, is that it's still a business, and that's why they call it show business. And so you have to appeal to, John and Jane in middle America if you want to see your project live on, ABC television or CBS or a streamer. Otherwise, then you'll be more of the indie in the indie space, which is fine, which is great. But if you are looking to be a Rami, you have to appeal to middle America. And I think that's why Rami is so successful. It's his authentic story, and it appeals to so many people. I don't even know if we answered her question, but that's what we got. That's all I got.
So I'm just going to do a plug, and then Susan, you can wrap us up here. For Anna Lily Amirpour's A Girl Walks Home Alone. Have you ever seen it? I think it's outstanding, but I also don't know a damn thing about anything. So what do you guys think about that film and the unusual way it portrays being Muslim?
I love that movie. I do a newsletter on like sort of diversity in sci-fi and fantasy and horror, and it's one of the first things I ever highlighted was that film, because I think it is so uniquely like that one amazing woman filmmaker's vision, and it's speaking within a tradition, the vampire film. It's speaking within a tradition, the coming of age film, but it is just aesthetically unique. And it is, tonally unique. And yes, it is made in America, but it's about Iranians, and so it's a really, really wonderful movie. And exactly, I think the kind of thing that is why independent film is great, and has opened doors for her, by the way, in mainstream Hollywood, which again, I think is sort of, one of the real promises of independent film, make this striking, unique vision that isn't being seen in the marketplace, and then see if that will help you open the doors to the big show.
And Malik, I have not seen it. I know who she is. I know she's very talented, but I have not seen it, but wildly talented. And can I just make one comment? And it might rub you the wrong way, Aleem. It might. Because we are trying to make narrative change, and playing catch up. I personally, and so does MPAC, really want to see, Muslim stories go big, because the main stage will always be the main stage, and I love indie films, but to be honest with you, if we gotta go to the main, the main stage. We gotta get our Get Outs, you know what I mean? Where it was independent and then it just,
That's undoubtedly true. It is, Hollywood is like one of the biggest American exports. When we talk about America's influence on the world, we can talk about our military strength. We can talk about, the reach of our diplomatic strength and our economy, but it's our movies. We define so many things through those movies. And, I think I'm someone who you can go watch a film like Black Panther or Wonder Woman and say, oh, they're the same old superhero movie, but on another level, they are so not, right? The people at the center of those movies, those are historical events, right? We will look back, whether you like them or hate them artistically, movies like that are historical events, and we are not there yet for this community, and we need to be, because the stakes are high. They really, really are. And so I 100% agree with you, Sue, when we think about where do you want, if you want to make change, to get back to Sue's original question, if you want to change things, if you want to have a big global impact, you have to think about engaging with the huge behemoth that is Hollywood.
Yeah.
That actually kind of relates to the last question that someone sent in, and I'll just read directly what they typed in. I had seen that HBO hired Black writers and the ratings went up. That's great news for the Black communities and people of color and their communities. But how do you feel about it being almost opportunistic of HBO to do this?
Sue said it best. It's a business. I think if right now we're at the point where if their economic interests align with our political, moral, artistic interests, let's move forward, and be cautious and navigate and speak out when you need to. But I think if you reach an inflection point where their bottom line lines up with what you want to see in the world, we should go with it.
It's like a friendship. It takes two to make the friendship work, but it takes one person in the friendship to shift the friendship. And so it took this, this craziness with injustice to shift it. And so be it, because if after the Black community, it'll be someone else, and it could be us, And so, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Does it feel hard to negotiate? That problem? Do you feel when you're in that situation and it feels they're capitalizing on diversity, right? Does it feel uncomfortable, or like you both of you answered in a way that's just not at all? Like you,
I think it feels uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable when I feel like it's actually influencing the content. You know what I mean? Like, I think when you get to the point where you realize,
Right.
like, to be in that big mainstream audience, there are things you have to navigate. There are changes that you have to sort of engage with, and I think that should be uncomfortable because you're negotiating this and that. But on the just on the level of like, oh, I'm helping this company make money. Like, if I feel like there's a value in the story that I want to tell and in the representation that gets out in the world and will have a positive impact, the history of all art and the history of the world is a negotiation between artist and patron, you know, for the art that actually reaches people. And so, yeah, I think I have some conflict. I have some nervousness about it, but also like, it's the way to go. It's the way to change things for sure.
And maybe this is not the answers that you wanted, but it's true. I mean, I'll just add another thing, you know, as an immigrant, you know, my community, the Muslim community, the Middle Eastern Muslim community, if you told your mom and dad, you know, in the 70s, I want to be an actress, which by the way, I did, they were like, what the hell? We didn't come, from, you know, whatever for you to be an actress, you know? And so these walls that we put up or we thought were put up by the others as gatekeepers, a lot of them were like psychologically our barriers. And so what we did not understand, I feel, and I'm being very general right now, as a community, that there really weren't that many gates closed. It's just that we never really made money for the industry. And so because it is a business, you know, and because we didn't have a critical mass, we weren't making money for them. I mean, that's just a sliver of the problem. I'm just saying that had we back in 40 years, 50 years ago, created, you know, did the Sound of Music for them, I don't know, for the industry, and made millions and millions of dollars, we would have had an easier ride. But we kept saying they hate us, the industry's close to us, you know, and then our parents didn't want us in the industry. And so we just recently in the last 2 decades thought, oh, wow, this industry is powerful and we can really actually be something in the industry. You know, I just kind of took off on a tangent, but my point is it's a business. And if you have a project, a screenplay that can make the industry millions and millions and millions, it doesn't matter.
that's amazing. So Susan, do you wanna say anything in closing?
Well, I did have another question. A couple of years, many years ago, we brought the movie Real Bad Arabs to campus.
Yeah.
And do you know if there are any other projects that are more up to date than that are out there?
Yeah, Valentino's Ghost by Michael Singh. Valentino's Ghost by Michael Singh, and I can put you in touch with him. If
It would be wonderful if what I'll do is I'll send to all the attendees your social media, and you know, I'll make sure everyone gets the op-ed, but also, you know, links to your projects and all that. But let's include some of those resources as well, and we'll go out to our audience with them. So that'd be great. So Aleem, you didn't get a chance to tell us about your new project. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about it before we go?
Sure. You know, in 1990, when the first Gulf War happened, I was in middle school. We actually piled into the cafeteria and watched part of the war. And on the CNN, like, I had this visceral memory of, you know, this newscaster kept saying this name of our new big bad guy, Saddam Hussein, 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 Hussein. And that was my last name too. And I will tell you, I was sitting next to like really good friends of mine, white kids who would back me up to this day. But also, every time he said Hussein, there was a couple of kids in front who turned around and they stared daggers at me. And I really, really wanted to just turn invisible in that moment. Like, I just wanted to vanish. And many, many years later, I realized that the way for me to finally tell my story was not through like an earnest autobiography, but to ask myself, okay, let me go back to that 12-year-old kid. What if he had gotten a superpower like that, invisibility or this and that, and like, how would that have changed his life? And so I'm gonna basically attempt in this TV pilot script to tell like my autobiographical story over sort of many events in recent Muslim American history, while also sort of invoking the superhero genre. To Sue's point, like, this is the biggest genre of our time, right? Like, this is, you know, the top grossing movies in the world are all superhero films. I both love them and dissatisfied with them. And so I want to take a crack at a series that sort of like both critiques the superhero genre and also, these representational issues we're talking about today.
Fabulous. And what's the timeline?
I mean, I'm really blessed that Sue and the Impact Lab supported it, and so I'm at the phase now where I'm rewriting the script, and I have interest from a couple of production companies, and so it begins the negotiation you were inquiring about, which is what happens when a script meets the economic forces needed to make a television show, which is a new arena for me, and so I'm just at the very beginning, and sort of engaging with those questions of, how do you make it appealing to them but still stay true to the story you want to tell?
Well, we can't wait for it. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Professor
Thank you
Hossain.
so much.
Thank you. My goodness, a pleasure.
I know, it's like it's an hour, just like that.
Gosh, it's an hour. I mean, it's a pleasure. I can't believe it.
Well, let's just do this every week. This is what
whenever you want.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for bringing this to our students and to the broader public. Support the work of Muslim Public Affairs Council. They're one of the great voices. And take Professor Hossain's classes, because obviously they're going to be awesome. So Brody says, fantastic event. Thank you very much to all, indeed. And thank you for your support, Brody. So everyone, thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll send out some follow-up. And thank you to the Office of Religious Spiritual Life as well for supporting so much. Thank you.
Be safe, everyone. Thank you so much.
Be safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.